Lindsay alluded to a bit about citizen development, and I think whenever we were writing the script for this one, we had used a bit of Copilot in there to help us with our overview of what exactly citizen development was. And in fact, the box at the top right-hand side there, I did ask AI to give me an overview of what was meant by citizen development. And I think the key thing in there is the non-IT employees. So people like myself who are running a service, it's an enabler for people like myself and others in the institution to be able to develop our own processes using some of the technologies. They talk about it in terms of being low code or no code platforms. And a lot of what I work with is essentially Excel. I know people say you shouldn't be using Excel for some of this stuff, but I actually do still use Excel. In fact, some of my CI colleagues, I think, wrote a blog not that long ago about the death of Excel, and we should be using SharePoint for everything. But I would say with any of these things, work with technologies that you know. So the four underlying technologies that we use to help support us with our management information reporting and our process reviews is actually SharePoint, Excel, Power Automate, and Power BI. Now, there are other Power apps as well. And no, there's the Power App one, which is more so if you're wanting to be portable and be able to do things on the go. What we're looking for are management information dashboards, and that's where Power BI comes in. Power BI is essentially, I think sometimes people describe it as Excel on steroids, essentially. If you know a lot of what you can do in Excel, Power BI, a lot of the functionality of Power BI is in Excel, but you can also then just use the application independently on its own. And that's where you get all your risk, your very good high visualizations for your management information dashboards. And I'm going to show you under the cover of the dashboard that we've been using for the cloud, for the digital strategy program in a few moments. SharePoint, we find we use a lot of. SharePoint is essentially just a list. We already have it as part of our Microsoft 365 products. We have a list of all our projects in there. We have a list of all the actions that we need to do, the decisions. So you could use Excel if you wanted for that as well. We find that we use SharePoint more because it's easier to give people access to and have multiple users working on it at a time, although Excel is improving and things like that. What I tend to find I use Excel for in terms of information is the budgetary side of things when I wanted to do local calculations for me. And then we've also got Power Automate in there as well. Not sure if you've ever come across that one, but that was probably one of the first tools that we started using at Strathclyde. It essentially allows you to be able to streamline your processes. And I've got a couple of examples on the slide deck. I've got about 17 slides to go through, and I'll do an overview of our dashboard as well. But I'll talk specifically about some of the processes we've used Power Automate to help us streamline things with. Okay, so where it began for us was actually on a program called the Cloud Program. Now, I put the timeline in here. We had a 3.5-year program of activity that we were running from within the PMO, whilst at the same time keeping the lights on around our governance work as well. So part-time delivery of the program and part-time delivery of our PMO services. Now, the Cloud Program essentially was about rolling out Microsoft Teams and Forms and Planner and To-Do, all those good technologies in there, and the Power Platform tools that we've been talking about here today. Now, it was somewhat helped by having a global pandemic at the beginning of it. We had automatically, people moved over to Teams anyway. So we had set ourselves a target of having X number of people working on Microsoft Teams. It's definitely the platform that's used and has continued to be used now by our staff community. We do still use Zoom as well for the student side of things, but there are conversations about moving away from that. So that was our introduction into the technologies. Early at the beginning of the program, we established a Power Automate user group. Now, that was made up of users from across the institution, people who had an interest in trying to streamline some of their processes. Now, we did have some technology staff in that, but the primary group of users who were involved in that were actually our business users. And as part of that group, people would come along and talk to us about how they've been using the technologies, give us snippets of a good example. I think one of the first use cases was one of our administrators working in the HR side of things looked at how they were streamlining the mentoring process. And an awful lot of what they used in Power Automate for was, instead of things going into an email box, the Microsoft Forms was the first point of entry for them. And they would use that to triage essentially all of their requests that were coming in and then automate things afterwards. So we had lots of different users talking to us about how they were using it, and that gave us ideas about how we could use it within the PMO side of things. I was running that user group because my role in the cloud program was essentially around management of the communications and engagement of the program. My colleague Graham Christie was responsible for the overall program management of the program. And together we ran the steering group as well as this kind of whole overarching program of activity to roll out the technologies. One of the things that we did for our steering group, now our steering group was made up of a number of chief officers, so our chief digital information officer. We had directors of information services and director of continuous improvement. We had academic colleagues as well. And we would meet regularly for the steering group, and we used that as our opportunity to actually introduce some of the new technologies to our senior staff. So we had two different dashboards that we used to put in front of them regularly. I think when we started the journey, we were using something called Infograph, which was a horrible, clunky bit of technology. And we moved away from that and we looked instead at, could we put this into Power BI? And because we were starting to introduce the tools, we used it as the opportunity to showcase to our senior staff how the tools could be used. So we had two dashboards in total for them. First one was about communications and engagement, showing them all the different activities we'd been up to, showing the types of people who interacted with us, the number of events that we'd run, all of that type of good information, which previously we would probably have put in a PDF that maybe nobody would have interacted with. That's usually been the feeling. You do a lot of work, you put in all this effort, write a report, and you think nobody actually even read that report in there. But they were certainly much more interested in engaging with the dashboards. So that was one of the dashboards. The second dashboard that we had was actually for benefits management. Now we actually used, because we were doing this dual role of having a running a program and still running the PMO service, we used the program as our method to trial out our benefits management framework. So we set a number of benefits during the program, including things like we wanted to have X number of users consistently using Microsoft Teams, and we monitored that throughout the program. I think we set ourselves maybe about 15 benefits in there, which was definitely a learning exercise for us. That was far too many to try and monitor on a regular basis and report back on. But the real benefit of doing the cloud program was, as well as being able to put these technologies out in front of people, it gave us that proper grounding of the benefits framework. And by the end of the cloud program, we had established the technologies that we needed. We had continued to work with the user groups into business as usual. That totally made sense because by that stage we were in the continuous improvement directorate, and these types of tools really just absolutely are complementary to the work of the continuous improvement team as well as the PMO. So it made sense for us to continue with them, and we're still running them as we speak. So we tend to run the user groups a couple of times a quarter, about 2 or 3 times a year.